All right, listen, I got to give you some thoughts on the state of the Democrat Party. Now, I will open up by saying, yes, I know that I am a conservative. I'm a longtime Republican. I've been an elected Republican. I've been a county chairman for a Republican. I've been on the state executive committee. So, yeah, I do have opinions about Democrats. Of course I do. But just trying to sit back and watch with a somewhat objective view, I cannot help but say that I think what we're watching right now is the destruction, the demise of the Democrat Party as we know it. So let me give you some thoughts on what I'm seeing right now about the self-immolation, if you will, of the Democrat Party as they set themselves on fire on a daily basis. Because what we're watching right now is truly remarkable. It's the once vaunted Democrat machine cascading in a death spiral, and all of it is self-inflicted. I mean, let's stop and think about this. Nothing about what I'm going to say is purely because the Republican Party has gained strength and clout. In part, the Democrat Party is basically to blame for the Democrat Party's current state and condition. All right, like point one. Point one is the lack of a national figure around which they can rally. It's gone. They don't have somebody at the top of the ticket. They don't have anybody who's inspiring the crowd. Gone are the days of Biden's, time in office. And oh, by the way, gone are the days of Obama worship. Every cause needs a central figure to provide leadership and representation, someone you can rally around, right? The Democrats have no one at the national level right now that centralizes their aspirations. They've got nobody who stands up and gives a speech that they all go, that's who we are. Nobody. You try to think. Is it Gavin Newsom? Please. Is it Josh Shapiro? No. Is it going to be Governor Beshear out of Kentucky? Name ID alone says most people don't know who that is. The truth of the matter is they don't have anybody who inspires and affirms and gives them a rallying point, someone who is the central figure to represent them on the broad stage. Now, point two, though, is they have a lack of clear and cohesive messaging. The Democrats right now, what is their message? Look, no team can take the field and be effective unless they know what the play is. And the Democrats right now just seem to lack the ability to message themselves in such a way that inspires people to want to join their effort. I mean, just going out there and saying, we stand for abortion and never Trump. That is not the same as effective policy messaging. It's just not. What's the plan? Do you know what the plan is? I don't. Right now, their plan is don't ever cheer for anything that Trump says. Make sure that common sense is just, uncommon to us. And oh, by the way, abortion. And let's spend some more money. That is not a plan. Listen, there's an old saying that hope is not a plan. Right now, the Democrats don't even have hope. They're just in the phase where no plan is having no plan. All right, point three on the demise of the Democrat Party is what I would call a lack of professional decorum. There's a wing of the Democrat Party right now that believes that ridiculing that which Americans have always held dear and value most, things like faith and patriotism and traditional values, that's their way forward. The inability to go to the speech that Donald Trump gave the other night and cheer for things like young C.J. Daniel, a kid who has survived brain cancer and was being honored at the speech. The fact that they couldn't even clap for him was an embarrassment to many who long for the days when the Democrat Party actually inspired them. You couple that with a constant barrage of cringe videos and interpretive dance and nonsensical race-baiting arguments, it just leaves many Americans literally too embarrassed to claim any affinity with the Democrat Party. I mean, think about it. If you want to attract people to your team, if you want to up your recruiting drive, if you want to get out the grassroots, you have to give them something to rally around, something to feel good about. And oh, by the way, don't embarrass yourself in the process. Right now, it's almost as if everybody on the Republican side are the cool kids and everybody on the other side are just really the outcasts who have nothing going on and no one wants to join their clique. All right. Here's one of the last points, though, about the demise of the Democrat Party. Look, none of what I just said about trying to regain your footing, about trying to reclaim your place in politics and the political aspirations of the nation, none of that works without money. Let's be honest. I mean, funds do drive political gains. That's a fact of life. It costs money to run elections. It costs money to do advertising. It costs money to hire consultants and put up the media and all the things that it takes to actually get elected in today's world. But the Democrat fundraising machine has centralized itself in radicalism. They spend money like water on things that accomplish literally nothing. Leaving a $1 billion campaign, $20 million in debt, aka Kamala Harris. Well, that's a death knell to future fundraising. People don't want to fundraise for you if they know that you're going to be wasting your assets and squandering them on things that don't do anything. And then you find this. If you're not familiar, there's an organization called Act Blue. Act Blue. Well, Republicans and Democrats both have their major fundraising arms. That's just part of life. The Republican side is called WinRed. That's the organization. And the Democrat side is called Act Blue. Act Blue, the major fundraising arm of the Democrat Party, is currently mired in investigations and scandal. Its staff are bailing like rats jumping shrimp. The Democrat fundraising machine is in complete disarray. And if you take out the money and you combine that with a complete lack of professional decorum, a lack of messaging, and a lack of a central figure to rally around, what do they have really? Yeah, Act Blue, by the way, if you take a look, you'll see that 7 of their top executives just recently quit, almost overnight. You've got investigations right now by Congress. You've got reports coming out that they may have been taking foreign donations, which is a campaign finance violation. You're going to find that there's any number of things they can't explain, like where the money went. And oh, by the way, how is it that, mom and pops around the nation, their names keep showing up as contributing donors on a regular basis for what amounts to sometimes 20, 30, 50 donations that when you go knock on their door, and people have done this, and ask them, they'll say, that's not me. I gave one time like $20. So there's a lot of fraud. There's a lot of complaint. Act Blue, it's falling apart. There's a story out there right now. I don't have this one substantiated, so I'll preface it by saying I don't have it substantiated. But there's a story out there right now that the last member of the general counsel's office, the lawyers for Act Blue, before he left, sent an email out to the rest of the staff reminding them that there are whistleblower laws that could protect them. If you have to remind the staff about using whistleblower laws, you really got to wonder what in God's name is going on. So yes, the Democrat fundraising machine is also in complete disarray. But the cautionary statement here, though, is that Republicans should never rest on their laurels. None of what I just described is unknown in the cyclical world of politics in America. I mean, Republicans, we would do well to continue building our conservative base and expanding our scope. I mean, if you look at this past election, Republicans made gains in minority votes, in different demographic votes, in states where we had not prevailed in recent years. The Electoral College and the popular vote were ours. That clearly indicates that, yes, we do have a mandate. And oh, by the way, we only have a mandate because we gained in terms of our support base. You want to keep doing what we're doing, you keep expanding that support base. You keep doing all the things it took to get that, and do not take it for granted. Do not take anyone for granted. And don't ever get to the point that you assume that someone is your vote. You remember the classic line during the 2020 campaign, when Joe Biden was doing an interview with Charlemagne the God, a black podcast and radio host. and Biden actually looked at him and said, "Man, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black." It was a clear indication he took that vote for granted. And guess what? He lost a sizable chunk of the black vote in the last election cycle. Republicans, we cannot do that. We have to continue expanding our scope and giving people all the reasons why they should keep bringing themselves into our big tent. But I'll say this too. Republicans also have to avoid becoming lazy. Because when you have a supermajority and a national mandate, it's possible to become complacent. I mean, people literally always rise to the level of their competition. If you go on the field and the other team really means nothing to you, and you don't think they've got anything going on, and you look at it like, okay, we're a professional football team playing a high school football team, what have we got to lose? I mean, if that's the way you look at things every single day, then what happens is you go out there and you play down. You play down and you get fat and lazy. The danger to Republicans is assuming that Democrats are going to stay in the position they're in. And they're not. The cyclical nature of politics is they will have a comeback day. They will. I have every reason to believe. As some of the old school finally dies off, as the Obama, as the Biden, as the Harris, as the Newsoms, as the Pelosi's, as they all begin to fade away, there will be new leadership that will rise, and we have to stay in the fight, and we have to secure this victory, because they will be back one day. And look, I'll be honest with you, there may be no greater example by comparison of what I'm describing about the Democrat Party right now than what occurred recently when President Trump spoke to the nation. Everything I just described, the lack of leadership, the lack of a central figure around whom they can rally, the lack of a message, the lack of decorum, the loss of fundraising capability, all of it was wrapped up in one night. I don't know about you, but I watched the full speech that was given by Trump to the joint session of the House and Senate. And it was an epic speech, I'll be honest. It marked the 5th time he's actually delivered such a speech to Congress. It was also, by the way, the longest speech ever by a president from the floor of the House and ran for almost an hour and 40 minutes. Think about that. He's only been in office a little over a month, but it took him the better part of 2 hours to recite all the things that have been done in that short amount of time. But as I watched, I could not help but remember the last time a president gave such a speech, and it was Joe Biden. Exactly 1 year and 3 days ago. The contrast between the two was stark. I remember years ago, when I was a kid, my dad was still in the Army. We were stationed in London, England. We took a trip to the main continent of Europe, and we went to West Berlin. It was before the wall fell. And I have distinct memories of standing on the platform at Checkpoint Charlie in West Berlin, looking over the Berlin Wall into East Berlin, and then turning around to look back at West Berlin, and it was like going from a black and white movie to a vibrant Technicolor big screen IMAX. One was drab and fretful, and the other was vibrant and full of life. And that, my friends, is exactly what it was like to watch Joe Biden speak a year ago and now compare that to Donald Trump now. Drab and dreary and full of threats versus optimism and hope and affirmation. Okay, so I looked back in the Rightside archives to see what my thoughts were in the aftermath of last year's speech. Maybe I'm also a glutton for punishment, I don't know. But I thought it was an important exercise for me to go through the comparison of what I had said about Biden's speech versus what I saw in Trump's speech this year. Now, whether or not Biden ever gave a good speech is really dependent upon your political views. It's hard to be a conservative pundit and find last year's Biden speech to be a good one. I mean, if I just took it on policy points alone, I would have to said that Biden's last speech was an epic fail. But then I'm also not a liberal progressive or a partisan Democrat. For the left side of the aisle, Biden's speech last year, it was meat and potatoes. It was as someone who views things from the right side, though, it was served up like pablum. It was just bland hooey. It was leftist talking points. All right, but that was the content. That was just the content. Let's be honest. The last State of the Union address by Joe Biden, it wasn't even about his talking points, to be honest. The world was not waiting with bated breath to hear what he had to say. The world was on the edge of its proverbial seat back then for the simple reason that everyone wanted to know if he could get through the hour without falling down. I mean, the level of relief on Democrats' faces back in March of 2024 when he stepped away from the lectern, it was not based in feeling strong about the policies and positions he espoused. Not at all. They were just relieved his brain didn't malfunction in mid-sentence and that he knew how to step away from the podium and where to go. In that regard, I guess, the White House staff and whoever juiced him up for the speech in March of 24, they were the winners. You contrast that, though, with the recent speech given by Trump. They're both around the same age. Trump didn't come on until a few minutes after 9 p.m. Eastern Time. He spoke for the better part of 2 hours, nonstop. He had facts, figures, he remembered names. He was also, by the way, very relaxed. He even cracked jokes and he delivered some zingers that were obviously not on his teleprompter. I mean, this was also at the end of a long, full day, one in which he didn't shy away from all the other duties and appearances, and he didn't put a lid on the day at lunchtime like Biden always did so he could prepare himself. Trump's stamina versus Biden's stamina, polar opposites, and you could see it. But there was also something else about the Biden speech last year that I have to address, because I could talk all day about how much I disagree with Biden's talking points, but something that no one can deny with any shred of honesty is that he was a horrible public speaker. And in that State of the Union address in March of 24, Biden spent an entire hour yelling at America, literally yelling at America, shaking his fist and scrunching up his face like he was having a complete moment of rage, raising his voice at times. I mean, you go back and look at the photo shots and the video clips, you can imagine him just like going back and yelling at those darn neighbor kids to get off his grass. Just scolding America for an hour. Look, the State of the Union is not meant to be an accusation or a blame game. The platform given to the president is meant to rally people, to gather up support for the measures he believes are working, to make a report to the nation, the State of the Union. Biden and his handlers, they totally missed that part. They chose to go down the route of using the speech to browbeat anyone who dared to differ. For a man who claimed to be the great uniter, Joe Biden gave us one of the most rancorously divisive speeches that I've ever seen. And again, you contrast that with Trump this year. He wasn't afraid to call people out, sure, but he did it with like sarcasm and wit. And he spent a great deal of his time actually affirming people. How many people sat up in the gallery there in the House chamber, hearing their names called out? Like I said earlier, there was one young man with brain cancer, a brain cancer survivor, who was honored with a Secret Service badge. That was a cool moment. That was a tear in your eye moment. That was heartfelt. That was honoring a kid and the kid's father, by the way, who had been doing all they could to fight the good fight. Gave him a Secret Service badge, and the look on the kid's face was priceless. And keep in mind, though, here's something else that you saw. In the wake of Doge and all the things that are happening and the downsizing of government and people getting mad about the FBI and the other services, and, you know, we had the 2 assassination attempts against President Trump during the campaign season. Secret Service was actually affirmed in doing this too. The Secret Service got an opportunity to show itself as an organization that cares about people. That was also a plus. Another one sitting up in the gallery was a young kid whose father was a law enforcement officer who had been killed in the line of duty. This kid's a 4.0 student or better with a solid dream of wanting to go to West Point. And as he sat there in the gallery, believing that he was there because, you know, to honor his father, President Trump said, "I want you to know that you're being told tonight you got your nomination to West Point." Y'all, the look on that kid's face. It was joy, and it was affirmation, and it was something that the president didn't have to do, but how fun was that? There were moms and athletes and law enforcement officers and good hard-working folks, one of which who lives not far from me right here in Alabama, who were sitting there being encouraged and recognized and loved on. Y'all, what a stark difference that was compared to the speech we saw last year where the whole nation got scolded and he got angry as he spoke, Joe Biden did. You see, a good speech is as much about tone and delivery as it is about content. And the Democrats did not have that figured out. You can have the best content, you can still lull your audience to sleep. You can have the greatest diction and resonating voice, but if your content is lacking and your timing is off, the speech can still be a failure. You can also claim, as Biden did last year, that everything was going great, still make people feel like they were being scolded. And by the way, everybody knew things weren't going great because we knew what the price of groceries was. Joe Biden's speechwriters may have put together a litany of potentially strong liberal talking points, but the man they also wrote it for had no clue how to engage with his audience. And in that vein, because this goes to my argument about them having a central figure, someone to rally around, I got to say I'm a fan of speeches. So let me chase that rabbit for a minute. I'm a fan of speeches. I've said before that there are great speeches that I love to read or to rewatch. Some are real, some are fictional, but they all have that same capacity for not just informing, but for identifying with the folks that are hearing it. You see, a good speech is about being able to deliver words that go beyond just being mere words. They become like a clarion call or a call to arms, a shot heard around the world. Not because they were just pretty words, but because they were delivered in such a way that made people want to engage the topic. They hit not just the mind, but the heart. So here's an example. You remember that classic 1996 movie, Independence Day? It was one of those science fiction, save the world kind of movies, but it didn't roll off into some kind of zombie apocalypse with people slipping off into depravity. No, it was a movie that actually made you feel glad to be an American. Gave us the sense that we could fight off a bear with a switch, right? Turns out the movie was originally, though, intended to be called Doomsday. Doomsday. But the screenwriters, they didn't want that to be the message. They knew the wording of the title was key, so they chose a better set of words. But they needed to convince the studio bosses. So they added the phrase Independence Day to the end of an epic speech that was delivered by actor Bill Pullman, who was playing the President of the United States. You may recall this. So first of all, Pullman, he researched great speeches of history. He knew that delivery was important. Screenwriter Dean Devlin, he said later he wrote the speech for Pullman's character in the movie, a speech that was meant to rally and encourage and inspire, but he said that when Pullman actually delivered it, everybody on the set was still caught off guard. He said none of us were prepared for it until his first rehearsal, and then we were just staring in awe and wonder. In the movie, Pullman played the president. He stood in front of a tired, beleaguered, ragtag group of Americans who were trying to figure out how to fight back against an invasion of advanced aliens who had already laid waste to much of the world. Picture that. Last year was Joe Biden. He had the chance coming out of COVID. He had the chance with an opportunity to secure the border, to fix the economy. And instead of talking about all the things we were going to overcome because we're overcomers, he talked about just basically, why aren't you getting on board with my plan? We're going to spend more money. So in the movie, Bill Pullman's character, the president, stood up on a platform. And he began somewhat quietly. And then his words began to grow in intensity. And the audience in the movie, and really in the theaters, were riveted. Because he said what they needed to hear, but he delivered it not just in words, but in tone and timing. And at one point, you may recall this, he said, should we win the day, the 4th of July will no longer be known as an American holiday, but as the day the world declared in one voice, we will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. We're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today, we celebrate our Independence Day. That speech was fictional, sure, but the studio bosses, they heard it, and the movie name was changed. It went from being called Doomsday to Independence Day because the speech was delivered so well. And yes, it was fictional, sure, so what? I would still bet that most of the people who saw that movie for the first time were ready to go out and whip some aliens with a big stick. Okay, so what's in a speech? Well, a good speech is about far more than just words. A good speech is about delivery as much as content. A good speech is also about the figure who delivers it, someone who has the respect and the command of the audience. A good speech moves the hearts and the minds in unison. A good speech has messaging. A good speech has all the things that the Democrat Party is lacking right now. A good speech has words that resonate, tone that invites the listener in, stories that identify with the audience, timing that hits the mark in the right moment. And in that regard, Joe Biden's last State of the Union was one of the most epic failures ever conjured up before a live audience. Donald Trump, he just spoke one for the ages. The only thing missing for Trump was a mic drop at the end. So here we are. The Democrats right now have no idea what to do about it. Their response thus far has been to double down on stupid. I mean, how many times are we going to watch a silly video where someone makes a fool of themselves as an elected official? How many times are we going to watch Maxine Waters demand certain things and claim racism? How many times are we going to watch Nancy Pelosi sit there and grumble because she's not the one holding the gavel? How many times is Hakeem Jeffries going to do the best he can to spin the madness of his own party members? How many times are we going to watch Gavin Newsom change his position to try and be what he needs to be next so we can get elected? How many times? I don't know. Right now, they appear to be wringing their hands and calling out imaginary injustice and just pretending that racists live under every rock. But everything that I just described, whether it be in the speaking before the House and the Senate, or whether it be on the national scale, the lack of leadership to give such a speech, the lack of a central figure around whom they can rally, the lack of a message, the lack of decorum, the loss of fundraising capability, y'all, it's all very real. The question is not whether the Dems are going to make a comeback. Of course, they probably will at some point. The real question is what Republicans are going to do about it. We cannot be complacent. We cannot become fat and lazy in the absence of true competition. We have to secure the victory and do it now, and we have to continue to grow the base and be ready for the day that the Dems get their feet back under them. Right now, though, they're wandering lost in the wilderness. That's my philosophy.